Hi folks, Six Slices here. Now, I'm going to show you two knives today, which couldn't be more different, but couldn't be more similar at the same time. They are, well, this one here is an Ontario made American jet pilot's knife. Now, I don't know a huge amount about the history of these things. The thing I really do know about these knives is when I was a child, we used to get the Sussex Armoury catalogue. Well, when I say child, a youth, Sussex Armoury catalogue, and it used to have all the samurai swords and all the different Bowie knives. And one of the knives that they had, or two of the knives they had in here, were the USMC fighter knife and this knife. And I always wanted one of these, but you know, I was poor in those days and I had to just make do with the Sheffield Bowie that I carried. And this was an unfulfilled dream. And later on, a few years ago, I sent Tobias, Knife Chats with Tobias, I sent him a bayonet that I'd picked up in a sale. Wasn't really something I collected, it's something he does collect, so I sent it to him, and he sent me a number of things in return, and one of the things he sent was this. It was brand new and shiny, the undyed leather and so on, but so he sent it to me and I got it, and I did some work on aging it and making it look a little bit more attractive. Now this one here though, it's an American Air Force jet pilot's knife. This one here is the British equivalent. Now, it's sort of complete, but not complete, because this particular one, it's not mine, it's been lent to me by my friend Andy, and he used to be in the RAF regiment. The RAF regiment is the Royal Air Force, has its own sort of little army, really. I don't know how many numbers there are. It's not a huge force, but they do a number of things. They have a band that does ceremonial stuff, but their day job, if you like, is protecting and defending RAF installations, manning Rapier missile systems, and whatever. There's probably Rapiers. Rapier was when I was in the Navy. Rapier was the state-of-the-art anti-jet fighter, land-based missile system. It's probably long been replaced, and they forgot to tell me. So, but if you were a jet pilot at the time, you would have had one of these. Andy had this strapped to his webbing, and this one is a full-on survival knife, but it's designed to do all sorts of different tasks, including cutting through aluminium or plexiglass. This saw is useless for cutting wood, but it's apparently very good for cutting through plexiglass and stuff like that, and of cockpits and stuff like that. But then it becomes a full-on survival knife. It's got this sort of hammer pommel. You can use these holes to strap it to a stick and make it into a spear. You've got the knife itself. It's blackened so for stealth and all of that stuff. This is much more simple in its aspirations, but it's also in some ways a more complicated knife. First thing, before I take it out with scabbard, you'll notice it has a metal scabbard. Now this again has a metal back scabbard. That's because when you're using this knife, you've probably just been involved in a fairly serious plane wreck. You've crash landed somewhere or whatever, and you don't really want to add to your woes by having a 5 inches of steel stuck in your leg. And this is the same, but this has a full metal scabbard. Now what is missing from this is that it has a cloth, usually bright orange cloth patch that it's fixed to with this rivet at this end, and it's sewn into it at this end, and the whole patch is then sewn onto the leg of your flying seat, so that the knife is, wherever you go it goes, but it has this metal sheath so that it goes outside you, not inside you. At least that's the plan, although I suspect that end is not particularly flesh friendly. Now, whilst this is, it's a straightforward little baby Bowie with a stacked leather sheath and a peened on hammer pommel and guard, this one is much more complicated and in many ways more interesting. I mean, it's plastic of some variety. It could be celluloid, it could be something else. Scales on it, but this is the thing. There's a pin that comes through here that's attached to the scabbard, and then you've got these two wings here. Now if you squeeze these in, the pin, it's on this spring, pulls the pin out. Pull these, it's a bit old and it's a bit knackered, but the idea being that you squeeze these two in, the pin comes out on a spring, and then the knife can fall out of the scabbard, and it will be retained by a lanyard through here, so that it's easy to get hold of, easy to get out, easy to use. Now it has, so see that spring, you see the spring is under tension. When it was in the knife, it's much flatter, and then it springs out. Now there are various patterns of this knife that were issued for over a period of time. This pattern was relatively short-lived, the clip blade, and then it went to sort of more like a sort of drop pointy thing, and then it ended up with this sort of hook knife that everybody hated, but that one stood the test of time. This one is dated 1996. How accurate that is to when it was actually issued and so forth, I don't know, and I don't really know exactly how and when Andy came by it, how he came by it, because I don't think it would have been issued kit. I think it's something that he picked up and said, that would be great fixed to my my webbing. I can get at that knife nice and easily by just pressing these two clips in. In terms of the quality of a knife, it's probably not that great, but this is the rarest of the patterns. The Mark II is its designation. What we do know about them is I think they were all made by Rogers. A lot of these sort of contracts went to a variety of companies, but I believe all of these were made by Rogers. I don't know what the steel is, but it is marked stainless, so it's probably 440, I would guess, because that was the common quality stainless steel of the time. You can see on here we have the star and the Maltese cross. The star and the Maltese cross, if you can see that, show up in there, but is the trademark of Joseph Rogers, Sheffield, England. So Joseph Rogers still exists, but they're now part of the Ibison group, Ibison double sharp, two sharp signs, as in musical sharp signs. So they still exist, and they still make knives in the name of Joseph Rogers. They don't make this knife anymore. So this was relatively short-lived. I don't know the actual dates that it was made from until. It's difficult to find too much information on it. The only information I could find was on an auctioneer's site, not like eBay, but banging the gavel type auctioneer. So I got very limited information. They had a number of different patterns, but they only had one of these, and they were long ago sold, but the prices were withheld. So I have no idea if it's valuable or not. I do know it's rare. I suspect it's not hugely valuable because it's not, it's not a sexy Nazi dagger or anything. This is a British Air Force Cold War era rescue knife, and its purpose was quite simply to cut yourself out of your webbing, cut through the lines of your parachute if you'd had to parachute and things like that. It's, you know, in the same vein as my German gravity knife that I had, but the German gravity knife is German and banned, so they're worth a lot of money, but I gave mine to the Royal Armouries. The RAF Museum couldn't take it, which was really sad. But anyway, here we are. This is a clip point blade. I think that was relatively short-lived because the clip point is all very well, and it does have a sort of, you know, fighty knife look about it, like that does. I mean, I'm sure that's why that appealed to me as a youth. But this is really utility knife. Utility knife made to look like a sexy fighty knife, but you know, it's not. Build quality is so really, to be honest. It's not outstanding, but as a piece of interesting knife work, I mean, I've never seen a mechanism like that on any other knife ever. Well, you can see it because my hand was over the top of it, but you see you've got these two wings, and when you press them in, it pulls the little bit at the top of the hole. I don't know if you can see it or not. If I put it over my hand, see, it's the bit at the top that moves. When Andy brought it in, the action was really quite difficult. It's got a little bit easier. Also, I should say, it's blunt. Blunt is a blunt thing, but you know, there's a relatively complicated construction in there, springs and all sorts. It's pinned, so you can't take it to bits and see exactly how it works, but I take it there's some sort of spring in between these two parts. The tang of the knife, incidentally, you can see it come up into here, but I think it goes up further, but it becomes narrower, and then you've got these plates on the outside, and then the plastic covers. So, and then this hole here is for the lanyard, which was to stop the knife, you know, disappearing forever. But you were supposed to be able to get it out one-handed. That was the purpose of all of this, which is the same with the gravity knife, that the Luftwaffe gravity knife, which I would love to have here as a comparison, but it's in a museum. But an interesting knife, one of the more interesting knives I've seen in a long time, actually. Not for its quality of manufacture or anything, but just the fact that it's an interesting thing from an interesting period. My grandfather, well, most of my family were in the RAF, but my grandfather was in the RAF at the end of the in the Cold War period. Well, through the Second World War through to 1975, and you know, he was flying. The last plane he flew was the Vulcan bomber. One of the big V bombers, and you know, these sorts of knives are of that era. This one is 1995, but the various patterns of these were used in those sorts of planes. It's a jet pilot's knife specifically, although there are earlier versions which go back to the Second World War. I don't know if this is still issued. I suspect not, but as I say, when it came, it had really flat black paint on it, and I gave it a really good rub down. It's one of the first knives I shot with the Lansky system, and I didn't do it desperately well, but I did get it at least quite sharp, because it wasn't very sharp when it arrived. And I rubbed some polish into the handles, because the grooves had just been cut out without any finish on them at all. But it I believe has that kind of authentic look of a used working knife. Now, whether this was ever used by a pilot or whether Andy got it straight out the stores, I don't know. I suspect it came from surplus, either officially or unofficially, because it doesn't, well, I suppose he would have taken the patch off it anyway if it did ever have the patch on it, because he wasn't carrying it as a pilot, he was carrying it as an RAF soldier. But at least it's Sheffield made, which is nice to see. They're buying at home, and well, there we are. As I say, it does, the mechanism and the sheath are not as great as they once were, but it does still fit, it does still work, but it's just not perfect. Is it back in? Oh, it's back in. Actually, it's getting better. I think it was just lack of use. I think Andy's been out of the regiment for a long time, so it's probably not something that's seen a great deal of use. It's not quite working properly, because this spring is supposed to spring it completely. You know, you don't want to be fiddling about with it like that in a while your plane's burning around you and you're trying to get out. But it does. It's getting better. When he handed it over to me, it was very difficult to get it to work. But it should really, when you press those, that should just spring out. And it doesn't. You have to really get in there, and I don't want to. I'm worried that if I overstretch the spring that I'll break it, and then I would be, well, if it was mine, I probably would just do it, but it's not. Yeah, you can see it's springing a little bit, but it should really spring. It should really spring all the way open, and it doesn't. Yeah, it should spring open, right open like that, and then the knife literally can fall out. And that's supposed to make it easier to get to when you need it. But anyway, this is the Mark II RAF pilot's knife. And I don't think I have much else to tell you about it, unfortunately. But there we are. Thank you very much. If you like this stuff, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of it, please subscribe and remember to ring the notifications bell, or you won't see anything. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.